Thanks very much, Jamie Twidale, for joining us today to talk about ANZAC Day. You're the CEO of RSL Victoria, and really thank you for making yourself available to chat to us. My name's Damian Wells. I'm the Managing Director of Collaburn Water. We provide water services in Central Victoria, and we're keen, ahead of ANZAC Day, to think about returned servicemen and women and what we might be able to do to acknowledge the service of people. Could I just throw to you, Jamie, to tell us a little bit about your history before taking on the role of CEO at RSL Victoria? You're a former member of our Defence Forces. Do you want to give a bit of context and history of yourself?
Yeah, can do, Damian, and thanks for having me on. And thanks to everybody that's watching and listening in. So I joined the Army as a young 17-year-old school dropout from regional New South Wales, and joined as a soldier way back in 1990, which feels like a lifetime ago now. And then I had a really great 22-year career in the full-time Army, worked my way up through the ranks as a soldier, and then became an officer, and had the joy of commanding the unit that I started in some 20 years earlier. And throughout that time, I lived through the peacetime Army of the 1990s, where we really weren't doing very much. We did a lot of exercises, and it was kind of like a bit of an endless footy trip, to tell the truth. And then, of course, the Australian Army deployed to East Timor in 99, and then into the Middle East from 2003 onwards. So the latter half of my career was significantly different. So I deployed to East Timor in 2002 for 6 months. And then in 2003, I went to the Solomon Islands for 4 months. And then in 2009, I deployed to Afghanistan for 6 months as a second in command of an engineer squadron in a place called Tarankout. And then when I left the full-time military to focus a little bit more on family, and then since then I've been working in the emergency services in Queensland and Victoria, and most recently at EPA Victoria, which is where I know Damian from. And then I had the really big privilege of starting with RSL Victoria as the CEO just before Christmas, when I then actually in January got called up for reserve service with Operation Bushfire Assist, and found myself back in uniform in Gippsland for the whole month of January. And so it's been quite an interesting ride to this date.
Fantastic, Jamie. And yeah, I bet that was a really interesting start to your role, and certainly acknowledge your service to the nation. And just on that topic, Jamie, what advice have you got for people? For some people, ANZAC Day is very front and centre and very top of mind. And for other people, it's something that happens a little bit further afield, and they know about it, but maybe don't always sort of pause and reflect. And for people such as yourself, or people you served with in the military, what does ANZAC Day mean for you?
Yeah, so ANZAC Day obviously comes out of the Gallipoli landings in 1915, but we get together every year and we think about that and the service and sacrifice of military people historically, but it really has become a part of the psyche of Australians and New Zealanders, in our DNA. And for veterans like myself, it's often the time of the year where we may reach out to other veterans that we might not have talked to. People that serve in the military tend to move around a lot, and your friends become the people that you're posted with. And you always get to see your friends again when you do your next posting. And once you leave the military, it can feel a little bit isolating, because you don't have those people around you that talk the same language and talk the same way. And any veteran watching me talk will know full on that I've been in the military just because of my mannerisms. So ANZAC Day is that time of the year where we really do make a concerted effort to catch up with our mates, whether it be by a phone call or a beer, probably too many beers. And this year, is particularly even more important because we can't do that.
Very good. Thanks, Jamie. And as far as the work of RSL Victoria goes, and as RSL Victoria contemplates an ANZAC Day that we haven't experienced probably since 1919, I think, when we had the previous pandemic. What's on the mind for you in your role as CEO of RSL Victoria, and how we can continue to acknowledge and celebrate ANZAC Day this weekend?
Yeah, so there's two key things there. The first one is front and centre of mind as the CEO of the organisation is to make sure that we're supporting our members so that they can get on with the business of supporting veterans and their families. And there's 280 sub-branches across Victoria. Most country towns have an RSL of some type, and some RSLs have much bigger commercial venues from RSLs that they might see. So at this time, with the whole coronavirus issue that's going on, it's really looking after those people. And I've been really heartened to see that a lot of the RSLs have really focused back in on connecting with veterans in their community, but because they can't be out and about doing other things. So they're working the phones, they're delivering food, they're supporting veterans who might need accommodation, and that's been absolutely fantastic to watch and see. And that always happens, but it's really at the forefront now, and you can really see it. As we move forward to commemorate ANZAC Day, a lot of RSL sub-branches are understandably disappointed that they can't hold a service this year. It's the biggest day on the calendar for a lot of country towns. It's the biggest day on the calendar for every RSL sub-branch across Victoria. So they're very, very disappointed, but they've been great in just getting behind the fact that we've got to look after our people, we've got to look after our elderly citizens. And then there'll be another ANZAC Day next year. And the big ticket thing there is really that making sure that all of our members and Victorians knew that ANZAC Day is not cancelled. ANZAC Day will never be cancelled. We'll just have to do it differently this year. And, in 1919 with the Spanish flu epidemic, also coincided with the end of World War I, and people came onto the streets to celebrate. And then a lot of people died because they spread the Spanish flu. And the other time that ANZAC Day has been really impacted, ironically, was 1951 due to polio. And there were still widespread marches, but it was a much significantly reduced. But this is, since 1919, this is the most reduced service ever.
And so Jamie, what can people do? We're practicing social distancing, we're at home with our families, we're working from home in the main. What can people do who would ordinarily attend a dawn service or acknowledge ANZAC Day in other ways? What can we do this ANZAC Day coming?
So there's been a huge movement on social media that sprung up very early after we announced that we weren't going to be holding public ANZAC Day services this year, about what's loosely been called ANZAC at home, or ANZAC in your driveway. We've been referring to it as Stand 2 for the ANZACs, and people might have seen the Light Up the Dawn commercials. And if we didn't have to make this up on the fly, we might have all come up with a single hashtag. But the key element here is that ANZAC Day is not cancelled, so everybody can stand in their front yard at 6 a.m. They can jump onto the RSL Victoria Facebook page and they could stream the service live from the Shrine of Remembrance, or they can watch it on Channel 7, tune into ABC Radio. There's a whole bunch of ways to do it. But in my street, for example, in my little courtyard, all of our neighbours will be lined up out the front of their houses with a candle at 6 a.m. and we'll all wave at each other, we'll listen to the last post, we'll observe a minute's silence, and we'll really go back to that core meaning of what ANZAC Day is all about.
Fantastic, Jamie. Look, thank you very much for your time, and fantastic to encourage people to stand to in their driveways, in their local street to acknowledge ANZAC Day this year. Thank you for your service to the nation. Thank you for your leadership role at RSL Victoria as the CEO, and we wish you all the very best for ANZAC Day this year, and thank you for making yourself available for today's discussion. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you, Damian. Appreciate it.